It's good to see you all. Thank you for joining us. My name is Reve Hitt, and I'm one of the assistant directors in the Career Center for Engineering and Physical Sciences. And you're at Underrepresented in STEM, How to Get Experience Employers Value. So this is being recorded, but we will turn off the recording at the end. And yeah, this event is all about how you guys can get experience, whether it's extracurriculars, projects, internships, research. There are so many different experiences you can get that will give you skills that employers look for in candidates. So we're going to cover that as well as some general tips for networking and interviewing. And then we're going to open the floor in the last 20 minutes to address your specific questions. So at that point, I'll stop recording and we'll address everything that we can. Before I introduce our amazing panelists, I am going to do a quick poll. Just about 3 questions. Yep, 3 questions here. So yeah, please take a minute to complete that. Thanks. We've got most responses here. Let's just give it a few more seconds. Okay, let's see what we got there. All right, so I asked you about how knowledgeable you feel about experience and different opportunities, how you feel about managing challenges with obtaining experience, and then your confidence in applying to opportunities. So as you can see, the goal of this event is to help increase your knowledge and confidence in these areas. And yeah, I hope that we can achieve that today. So now I'm going to stop sharing so we can see everyone in the room here. And feel free to, keep your video off if you prefer. Whatever works best for you since we're recording. And I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves. So first, let's begin with Denny. We'll just go in alphabetical order.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. I'm currently a senior at UC Berkeley studying computer science. In the past, I had an internship at Disney last spring. And last summer, I worked at Atlassian, both for software development and engineering. And I'm also currently one of the presidents of a tech consulting club at UC Berkeley called Diversitech.
Thanks, Denny. And thanks for being here today.
Yeah,
next, I'll pass it to Dan.
Hi, my name is Dan Garcia. I graduated with mechanical engineering degree from Cal in 2004. Strange to think that was so long ago, but have had kind of a non-traditional career path, and currently I'm at Facebook working as a construction lawyer in their real estate, construction, and energy legal team.
Thanks, Dan. And Joe.
Yeah, hi everyone, good afternoon. Joe Ham-Silvestre, he, him pronouns. I graduated from Berkeley in 2011 with an ethnic studies and French language double major. Currently, I work at SAP. It's a global ERP company. We provide software solutions, but I lead strategy and experience for SAP Next Talent. It's a recent grad tech rotation program.
Awesome, thanks, Joe. Cool, so let's get started with the panel discussion. My first question is for you, Denny. How have you found opportunities to get experience as a student? And please speak to any sort of experience like projects and extracurriculars as well.
Yeah, so I guess for general experiences like projects, extracurriculars, and internships, Primarily, I looked a lot on like career websites, so like Handshake and LinkedIn actually. So when I applied to Disney, which was one of my previous internships, I found a listing on LinkedIn and directly messaged the recruiter for the role for like a personalized cover letter and resume on why I wanted to work there. And that actually got me like a step up because the recruiter messaged me back saying they liked how I reached out to them and they kind of read through my resume directly and kind of brought me into the next step after the resume screening. And after that, I was able to interview normally and got the position. Then for Alaskon, which was my internship last summer, I saw that they were actually hosting an info session with a UC Berkeley club on like a Facebook event. So I went to it through like an online Zoom session and I talked to the few recruiters and engineers there. And they were directly like specifically looking for Berkeley students. So that was really nice because a lot of roles outside will actually look for like students like no matter what college to go to, but I think finding like specific Berkeley related opportunities is very useful because like the amount of people you're competing against is very narrow instead of a wide pool. So I think after going to that event for Atlassian, I applied right after and immediately got the coding challenge rather than waiting a few weeks to potentially get rejected. So that was really nice. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Denny. I'm glad to hear that you had a good experience with Handshake and then other opportunities on campus.
Mm-hmm.
My next question is for Dan and Joseph. Can you speak to what experience you obtained as a student that helped you get full-time positions when you graduated? And why don't we start with Joe?
Yeah, really good question when it came to like level of involvement that I had starting out at Cal. I know two of the things that I was definitely invested in was one, I had a professional opportunity externally. So I had a part-time job that I had through work study that allowed me to, just get the necessary skill sets that I needed in order to come into the workforce. I was working at a high school. I was doing some after-school teaching and programming, which I thought was really, really neat and helped me in like a lot of the human skills that I still use today. Within the or at Berkeley, two things that I was involved in included the UC Berkeley Gender Equity Resource Center. So I was interning there, really been able to kind of increase my network there. And then also I was working with the Chicano Latino Alumni Association. And so it was really nice to be able to get those connections for alumni specifically and being able to then solidify a role after graduation.
Yeah, so I mentioned that my path is a little bit non-standard, but there were some things while I was at Cal that really helped me out. Right when I had actually gotten approval to change my major from civil engineering to mechanical engineering, and one big reason for that change was that I met a professor, a mechanical engineering professor at Cal that was doing some really interesting research regarding computer hard drives, and I started to develop a strong interest in that area. And at the time, undergraduate research positions were almost non-existent, and so this was one of the few opportunities he shared with me after I expressed an interest that there was an opportunity for one or two undergrads to work on his team, and he'd like to talk with me more if I was interested in doing that. And so I started down down that path, and at the same time, just to have some part-time work while I was in school. This is my first year. I ended up getting a part-time office job at the San Francisco Law School. It's an evening law school in San Francisco, and a business owner who owned his own construction management company with a partner of his found out that I was an engineering student at Cal. And he had heard that I was a civil engineering student, and which is closely related to construction and construction management. And he offered to hire me, to do part-time work away from the law school. And that eventually led to an internship at the San Francisco airport, where I got to cycle through a number of different positions over a summer. And because of various challenges in my life at that time, I actually decided to take a break from school, and that turned into a construction management career for me. So just word of mouth, but what led me there, was that that interest, but it was a bit ironic that right after I got that change in major approved, that I ended up doing something more closely related to civil engineering. But anyway, any undergraduate opportunities that you might see, or internship opportunities, hopefully they're more plentiful than they were when I was going to Cal. I would certainly recommend checking those out.
Great, thanks for sharing, Joe and Dan. It sounds like those individual connections that you made, whether it was through an organization on campus like the Gender and Equity Center, or just folks that you maybe have met in other experiences, have helped kind of set up your introduction to other opportunities. Great. So now I'd like you all to talk about challenges you've encountered getting this experience, or other opportunities. And then how did you manage that or overcome that? Often being underrepresented in STEM, we face challenges, right? So it's difficult when you don't have someone who can show you the ropes in a sense, right? Or you don't know people at these companies, right? If you don't have family or friends that work there, it's hard to make those connections. I'm hoping you all can kind of speak to how you dealt with those things personally. And why don't we start with Denny again for this one?
Yeah, so I think one of the bigger challenges I had come into Berkeley, kind of like finding opportunities for myself, was that as a CS major, I actually have never coded since starting since my freshman year. So that's when I first started coding. And I really did not know anything about computer science at all. Two of my parents, or both my parents, are immigrants from Vietnam. So we're all low income first gen family. So there really wasn't really anyone I could really reach out to in my family. So what I really tried to do was join a network at Berkeley to maybe find a club or organization that I could kind of join and talk to any upperclassmen that may have experience or advice they can give me regarding career development, classes to take, for instance. And I think my freshman year, I tried joining several clubs, and one that really helped me a lot was Diversitech. And so in this club, there were a lot of upperclassmen, juniors and seniors that had a lot of experience taking CS classes, and a lot of experience recruiting for internships and full-time careers. So I think kind of joining that club and kind of being open to asking questions, whether it be oh, what classes should I take next semester? I feel behind in CS, how can I kind of leverage my connections and talk to them and take classes to make myself feel I'm on the same level as other people in my major. So I think joining clubs and kind of joining student groups to kind of help me ask questions when you don't really have anyone else you can really talk to really helped me personally. Yeah.
Nice. I'm glad you were able to leverage your network in Diversitech.
Mm-hmm.
And then why don't we go to Dan for this one?
Yeah, sure. It was, I was faced with a choice my senior year, whether to try to go into an engineering career or to, continue building on the construction management career that I started. And when I started looking at career opportunities for entry-level engineers, I don't know what it's like today or what's been the last few years, but at that time, it seemed like most of the entry-level jobs were requiring 2+ years of experience. So there's a sort of chicken and the egg scenario that well, if nobody's offering entry-level positions with 0 experience, then how do you get 2+ years experience? And so what I realized after seeing a lot of this was that there are a lot more experiences and work opportunities out there than working for the big sort of name brand companies. And in fact, a lot of those opportunities, especially at the entry level, will give you more deeper or more challenging experience than if you went to a larger firm or larger company. So the first construction management company that I worked for, I think I was the 12th employee ever, and at the time there was a total of 8 employees. It's a consulting firm for construction, but I got to do so many different things that my counterparts who might have started their careers at Turner or Clark or DPR, that they were doing very not very challenging work, a lot of very repetitive work, and I was doing a lot of work that required a lot of analysis and thinking on my feet, and even getting my feet wet with negotiations and And so don't discount the small companies. You'll have a lot more to talk about when you're interviewing for those jobs that require 2+ years of experience, if you give one of those a shot. Also, I wouldn't discount grad school. At the time, it seemed like there was a shift that a lot of positions were requiring, master's level and above, at least a lot of the job postings that I saw. And so, just putting in another 1.5 or 2 years in school could, help to build your base, give you additional time to network and to explore additional opportunities. And so, I would encourage folks to try out those those various opportunities.
Yeah, thanks, Dan, for sharing those strategies. I've personally heard from lots of recruiters that even if you don't meet 100% of the qualifications, if you meet about 80 to 90%, it's usually okay to apply anyway, because sometimes there's some flexibility with those requirements that they state on their job postings. But yeah, that's, oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I know this is a little bit more structured, but on that particular point, I've done a lot of like recruiting work and a lot of interviewing work to try to increase representation of minorities in both engineering and in law. And there are some interesting statistics that those who come from families where parents or grandparents were professionals or worked in the same career, they when polled, they tended to be more comfortable or willing to apply for positions, even though they may have only checked off like half of the qualifications that were listed. And most of the minority applicants wouldn't even apply if they didn't meet, say, like at least 90%. So I'm glad you made that point. It's, even though you might not feel like you would be a good fit, you might be surprised that you could be just the person that they're looking for, and they're aiming high, but something that you might be able to bring to the table might be the best thing for that employer. So it's awesome you brought that up.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I've definitely read similar studies that show that minorities or underrepresented folks tend to not apply to as many positions because of that. They don't think they're a good fit when they actually are. Yeah, and then Joe, do you want to share about your experience?
Yeah, two things. I think along that same vein, one of the challenges in experience is kind of cross-skill transfer into perhaps new roles that are within entirely different industry than where you're at. Shortly after college, I joined a large mental health organization on the West Coast. And, I thought that I was going to be working in mental health and government fields. I felt like that was where I was going to go. And then needless to say, everyone's kind of spiral career trajectory ended up landing me into wanting to get my graduate degree in business. And that's when I got exposed to the tech sector. And, I was really excited knowing that I lived in the Bay Area to see what tech is all about. And, knowing that I had possessed these skill sets, I had solidified, at the interview table, that is really what I pitched myself as, is that, based on the fact that I am non-normative, getting it or wanting to pivot into technology, these were the skill sets that I was able to acquire from my mental health profession that I feel like were applicable, or perhaps even gaps in the current team standing and makeup. The fact that I was moving into talent acquisition, there's a lot of social behavioral theory that I was able to then apply in the interview room that they hadn't really thought about before. Stylized techniques that hiring managers can use in the interview table to ensure that there's an unbiased approach to candidacy, things of the like that, I was able to build out from my mental health profession that I then translated over into tech. So needless to say, the challenge, I think, is the immediate, like, should I apply? Should I not apply? Really taking an audit of what skill sets you have and how can they actually have you stand out from perhaps the cookie cutter, maybe more standardized journey of lots of candidates into these positions. I think second to that, another challenge that I've seen more right maybe 2 years after you've graduated is this FOMO of experience, right? oftentimes there's going to be countless projects that are going to be thrown at you and your team. And as a first gen student, I feel like more is more, and I want to eat it all. And I hunger, like I have that hunger to like want to take on every single project, and came to realize that I have to be a little more intentional in what skill sets and what value add I can bring to the table in the projects that I will take on, while also, identifying, is this a good move for me? And and it's a hard pill to swallow when you're thinking, oh my goodness, if I don't take this role, like, will I be up for a promotion, or will I be up for the next project? And, I came to find that there's more than enough projects out there in the world. And now it's really you able to then activate that intentionality in what you choose. It's another one that I've experienced further out from graduation, but still important to think about.
Thanks, Joe. I love that you shared that sometimes skills that we think are not relevant can actually be relevant, right? I mean, technical skills in the STEM field are important, definitely, but employers care a lot about your communication, your collaboration, how you've led or maybe mentored other people as well, because who doesn't want to work with a collaborative, communicative coworker, right? Those are things that we all need. So yeah, I'm glad you shared a piece of that along with what you shared about projects. So yeah, I want to turn it back over to Denny. If you could please describe what helped you the most. Kind of boil it down for us. What was the most helpful when applying not only to professional opportunities, but to like student clubs and whatnot?
Yeah, I think for both student clubs and professional opportunities, they're very similar in the sense that talking to people in those clubs or companies helps you kind of like understand like insight and kind of like what the club and company is like, but also gives them like a first impression of how you are, and like if they are like reviewing your application or your resume or something about you, they'll remember that impression in addition to what they're currently reading. So when I applied to Diversitect, I've actually talked to people already in the club to kind of understand like what they like about it, but also like they've had like events throughout the beginning of the semester for coffee chats, for info sessions. So I went to those, kind of talk to them to not only kind of like understand what the club's about, but hopefully leave a good impression of like who I am as an applicant. This is pretty similar to when I'm applying to jobs as well. So when I find an opportunity I like, I try to not just cold apply, because usually when I do cold apply with like just like straight up my resume, I get a bad like rate of like success. So usually like around like 90% of my cold applies actually lead up to rejection. But in terms of like actually finding a recruiter or someone who's actually has experience at that company, whether it's like directly reaching out to them on LinkedIn, or kind of like if it's a friend you already know, kind of hitting them up for a coffee chat, I think that really helps kind of get that valuable insight. And like when you're applying, you can additionally have a cover letter where you kind of talk about what you really like about the company, and also like talk about how you personally had this chat or conversation with someone in the company. And then like I think that gives you more like credibility and like leverage as a applicant compared to someone else who just doesn't really have that same experience or like that same talk with someone already in the company. Yeah. So basically just like, or not basically, but like networking, kind of like not cold applying, but kind of like reaching out to someone that has that same experience for that role, or someone who's like in charge of that role, helps a lot in kind of getting that connection and kind of getting that step above other people who are applying to that same role or club. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Denny. This is often something that we talk about in the Career Center. The more targeted and tailored you are with your approach, usually the better it is. You get more interviews if you're reaching out to people and really making sure that you're showing yourself as a good fit for an opportunity, rather than just spreading the resume everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I appreciate that. So yeah, let's hear from our alumni on what you two think and underrepresented students can do to stand out in their applications to opportunities. Why don't we start with Joe this time?
Yeah, something that I found rewarding, at least in my own experience, and also when I've hired folks who perhaps come from underrepresented, diverse backgrounds, is finding beauty in struggle when it comes to like grit, tenacity, perseverance, perhaps even like scrappiness, right? Like I remember I may have been applying for either I may have been applying for a role at SAP, if not prior to SAP. I remember adding scrappiness as one of my strengths. And then I went into this moment of vulnerability where I was sharing where I'm the oldest of 5 boys. And so I had to make do with very little, and how I feel like that translates a lot to kind of the resources that are at my disposal, right? Like my experiences that I had at a mental health organization, making a lot out of maybe very few resources, being able to, identify what are some, ways in which we can spread this out a bit more. And that was, I think, one of the eye-opening moments for my manager at that time, who had hired me, who, didn't come from a similar experience, or also who saw value in that. So I say it to say, don't, underestimate the power of maybe some of these, struggles that you may have had currently, or that you are still going through, or you maybe you've already overcome, but how that is actually a benefit. So I would say that.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That persistence and resilience that people hold can be a huge asset, right, for a company. How about you, Dan? Do you have any advice around how people can stand out?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really want to, start off just by echoing what Joe shared. I think that there can be a tendency for minorities who have had challenging experiences sort of hide that, or feel like they don't want to highlight that. But anytime that you can highlight that you have secured a favorable outcome to a very difficult or challenging situation, I mean, that's the kind of people that employers want to hire. And so if you can do that in an effective way, possibly not sharing too intimate details, but getting your point across and sharing your story in an interview, I think that really can go a long way. I agree with that. I think there are probably a lot of don'ts that are helpful in terms of standing out. I think a lot of employers have a tendency to discount. There's could be this unconscious bias happening, where like if they see 1 or 2 flaws, and there's a for instance, a Hispanic or Latino surname or Latina, that they might draw an incorrect conclusion about that person's qualifications or ability. And so I would just really strongly emphasize making sure that your resume is technically perfect. And I know that sounds like a high bar, but right out of the gate, and I've looked at hundreds of resumes, when whether they're minority applicants or not, when I come across flawless resumes, and you can tell fairly quickly whether a resume, 1 or 2 page resume, is flawless, then they sort of make it past the first cut, in my opinion. And then also in your resume, making sure not to use a lot of buzzwords or adjectives, and less is more. Like, just highlight where you have had impact, where you have overcome a difficult challenge, what you were able to accomplish, and be specific. And I think, Reve, you probably give that kind of advice constantly, but yeah, avoid the buzzwords and focus on substance. Like, what have you been able to accomplish? Like, what sets you apart? And that really stands out too. I think also showing that you're well-rounded. I mean, your employer, either unconsciously or consciously, they're going to be thinking about, what's it going to be like working with this person that I'm sitting across. And so, you don't want to be too stiff or unapproachable. You want to be professional, but also a bit relaxed, I think. So I think that comes just from practice. So if you ever have opportunities to do like mock interviewing, take advantage of those opportunities. The more practice you have, even if you're just practicing in front of a mirror or a relative, that will help you to be more relaxed and confident when you're actually in the interview setting. And also just be sure to dress professionally. You'd be surprised. I did a lot of on-campus interviews, and these are typically reserved for the top 20% of law students at a law school. And you'll see folks with a tie that's loosened, or collars unbuttoned, or a shirt that clearly wasn't ironed or pressed. I mean, you'd be surprised, like little things like that can really turn off an interview or an employer. So just, make sure you're professional in dress, but also, try to be relaxed and relatable. And not that you want to overly focus on this, but if you have an opportunity in advance of the interview to get to know a little bit about the interviewer, their interests or their likes or dislikes, you can reference something like that, and that can help to make a connection or help to create a little bit more relaxed atmosphere, or one where the employer might might actually enjoy the process a little bit more than they would otherwise, recognizing that they're sitting across from a human being that they have some connection with. That can be really helpful too. So I know there's a lot packed in there, but I think all those things combined can really help you stand out.
Yeah, thanks, Dan, for all of those tips. And yeah, thanks for sharing about the unconscious bias. We all know that unfortunately is sometimes a reality. And yeah, like you mentioned, it's great to just really emphasize the impacts and achievements that you've made as an individual. That will help you stand out. So I'm going to put a link in the chat here to Handshake, where you all can schedule career counseling appointments. If you want help with your resume or how to describe your accomplishments, that's what we're here for. So please schedule an appointment with us. And then I want to address, it takes a lot of time and energy to apply for these types of opportunities, or even to do some side projects, right, while you're a busy student. So I'm wondering, Denny, if you could share, how have you balanced this, gaining experience while also doing classwork?
Yeah, that's a good question. So to kind of keep myself in check, I kind of have a schedule of upcoming deadlines, as well as like daily task lists I want to finish by the end of the day. So like having a well-structured set of things I want to do and finish by the end of the day really helps me keep myself in check in both academics and recruiting and just career development. And if I do have a lot of upcoming deadlines, like midterms, interviews, project deadlines as well, I try to prioritize things that are more important than others, and also see if I can reschedule certain things in advance. So for instance, I think last year, my junior year, I had an interview that kind of conflicted with a midterm I had. So the interview was a day before my midterm. And so I kind of just reached out to a recruiter directly and kind of see if I could reschedule the interview to next week after my midterm, so I could have time to both prepare for midterm and for the interview. And my recruiter happily scheduled it for next Wednesday. So I think it's being active about being transparent about what deadlines you have, and kind of if you do have a lot on your plate, try to reach out to maybe recruiters or professors or people in charge of your deadlines and see if you can push things around if things get really bad. But I think if you are struggling and you don't reach out, that kind of it's a block that you didn't really try. So I think giving yourself that leeway of reaching out to people that could actually help you is really important. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing how you balance that yourself. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm sure we might get some questions about that later, as that comes up a lot in the Career Center. So why don't we wrap up? I don't think we'll be able to get to all of these questions pre-planned here, but why don't we do a little bit more about interviewing? And yeah, thank you, Dan, for sharing some tips so far, but did you have any other suggestions on how students can perform well in interviews?
Yeah, I realized that I was heading into that area, after the fact, so I apologize. But I think the one other thing I might just emphasize, and you'd be surprised how often this happens or doesn't happen, but be sure to listen carefully to the questions when they're being asked. Even some folks with just really incredible resumes and GPAs, sometimes they're so anxious, or they're already thinking about their answer before the question is finished, that they don't actually get around to answering the question. Or they may think that their strategy might be, I don't do great when I'm put on the spot, so I'll just navigate the conversation towards what I'm familiar with rather than answering the question. So just be aware that can be a turnoff for an interviewer. be sure to focus and listen, maybe even take a deep breath or count to 3 before you start to speak, when you're getting ready to give, your thoughtful answer, to the question. And then finally, I would just say, it's hard to come up with something on the spot, and a lot of interviewers now are probing more into difficult or challenging situations that you may have navigated. And so have something in mind, have 1 or 2 stories in mind about a challenging situation and how you managed or navigated that to a successful conclusion. It's funny, sometimes I ask that question, and like just very recently, somebody answered the question by explaining this difficult situation and what they did, but there was actually a bad outcome. And so, really, you want to highlight, how you brought value, how you had an impact, how you were responsible for a favorable outcome, and you can. And so I'd advise thinking about that in advance of the interview so that you can be ready for that. And even if the interviewer doesn't answer that question, through the conversation, there will likely be an opportunity for you to share that, and that often has a significant impact in the interview.
Awesome, thank you, Dan. Joe, did you have anything to add to interviewing tips?
I think the one interviewing tip and then 2 approaches that you can do that I've seen resonate really well in the past in my own interviewing and then others is when you're thinking about strengths ad or skills ad, getting an opportunity to research the organization's mission and values, and not verbatim saying, I have these, insert this mission, insert this value, but more so, what are some values, or what is your own personal mission, and how does it align to perhaps the organization? I mean, there's a reason why you apply to that company outside of the role itself, right? Now, you may be qualified for the role, but why would you then be a standout candidate or standout employee to the organization? And I think that might be a good approach. Second to that is there's always this like small talk that, though might be a bias in the decision-making process, it allows you from a mental, psychological perspective to be at ease in a conversation in order to have a level of comfortability with the individual. And so, doing the like LinkedIn stalking, or what are their interests, and then being able to then tie that in, right? I've countless times people have said, hey, I was looking at your LinkedIn and I see that you were also a Berkeley alum, right? And it almost, though as an interviewer, I know that I catch myself in like making sure that my decision-making process has that bias, and I check that bias. But as an interviewee, like those are moments where you can kind of reassure yourself in that moment, especially if there are some nerves involved. So safe to say, those are the 2 things that I've definitely seen.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. So at this point, I'm going to stop recording.